What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. We've had time to absorb the changes from the Season 2 Hotfix patch, and with Ramattra going into Ranked this week, I wanted to prep you guys for the impact he is or isn't going to have, as well as reassess the entire game on this rather different patch. The hero performance has shifted kind of drastically in a surprising way. We'll get into all that right after this quick message. Christmas came early this year with today's video sponsor, Manscaped. Their new performance package makes an excellent gift for yourself, a friend, your dad, anybody. The star of the show is the Lawnmower 4.0, which is waterproof, cordless. You can use it in the shower, and the patented skin-safe technology keeps your jingle balls merry this holiday season. Don't trim the holiday hedges without it. Crop Reserver and Crop Reviver keeps your smell game strong. Put on the deodorant after you shower. Whip out the toner in the clutch right before you go under the mistletoe. The Weed Whacker is a must. Nose and ear hairs gone in seconds. It stops you from looking like an out-of-work mall Santa. And the Shears 2.0 luxury 6-piece stainless steel nail kit keeps you covered from head to toe. Ladies always notice your nails. Fellas, you know you're trying to be on the nice and the naughty list, so pick yourself up a Manscaped performance package for yourself or a friend today. If you take our link in the description and use our promo code Overwatch, you get 20% off your entire order and free shipping, as well as 2 free gifts, the Shed Travel Bag and Manscaped's luxurious anti-chafing boxer briefs. Take the link to go to manscaped.com and use our code Overwatch to get 20% off plus free international shipping and 2 free gifts. Making a tier list with a brand new character who's kind of confusing makes it difficult to give advice because Ramattra is the type of pick that has a lot of potential value, but is a very technical hero, one that requires execution and teamwork to really actualize. So whereas I think as the community learns him more and what his playstyle actually is, you're going to see a lot more out of him. So perhaps by the later stages of the season, and especially if another buff comes through to him, the problem is if your team either staggers, doesn't regroup, doesn't position well themselves, Ramattra's not going to bail you out of that situation. And since there's tanks that do, I'm going to consider him more of a top 1% type pick as opposed to someone who's going to be doing a lot of work for the average player. Ramattra as a pick is less of a tempo tank and more of the first vision of what they wanted Orisa 1.0 to be, more of an anchor tank. Ramattra is really good at holding his position and interacting with the game. As things start to move around him, he can snare them, pressure them down, and has the most raw durability of any tank, at least when it comes to damage. He potentially can hold the front line and anchor the objective forever when you set him up correctly. But what he doesn't do is easily run at the enemy team and pick off out of position squishies. So his playstyle is kind of like really good at things that might not matter for the average player. Because whereas I would say in a slow, more tactical gameplay exchange, Ramatra's got a lot of options. And we'll play the slow game to work up towards his amazing ultimate, which can guarantee objective fights. But because our S and A tier tanks, Roadhog, Orisa, and Doomfist all can see an out of position target and easily wipe them out, or get more value when their team's in poor positioning, they're going to be the top tier tanks for me. I really like Ramattra in the game because actually, funnily enough, him existing in teams trying to play around him makes other tank matchups more relevant. Because what Ramattra's weak to is really fast characters going at his backline. His peel isn't that strong or severe. None of his abilities or attacks are big impact. He's more of a control over time tank. So if you play fast as a wrecking ball and go at his backline, it's kind of hard for him to react fast enough to do much about it, as opposed to Roadhog, Orisa, and Doomfist, who all have stuns and burst of damage that can get pickoffs in their own right. This makes my Season 2 tier list feel kind of wonky, because it's going to depend on what you're up against. The cool thing is, as they add more heroes and players try new comps, it makes irrelevant ones at least have a matchup they can be good in, because otherwise I would say Rhine, Junker Queen, and Wrecking Ball are just bad. But against a slower tank like Ramattra, if you get in on his team, you will get to play the game, but against other tanks you won't. You'll want to pick Ramattra in order to zone out ranged hit scan characters, or to shoot back against a damage over time pick like Torbjorn, but is going to require you to have excellent targeting, management, and positioning to maximize. Because his damage is on the lower end, if you're shooting the wrong thing for too long, you're going to feel like you have no impact. And remember, his strengths is having the best in class ranged weapon, and with the new Nemesis buffs, he can get reliable damage on targets even past barriers, but also with that Nemesis move speed, he can run away and reposition. So you can sort of soldier sprint his way to position again. So that's Ramattra. My hope is you don't see him too much on your team because I think it's a lot easier to play everything else. It's no coincidence that Hog, Orisa, and Doomfist all have stuns. And there's a bit of a meta triangle around them where the severity of Doom's playstyle can kind of mimic what other lower tier characters want to do, but just faster with better stats. The two brawler stun characters above him will be able to do high damage to him and punish him if he makes a mistake. Meanwhile, also, Orisa and Roadhog are considered overstatted for sure, difficult to interact with, and whereas the new Ana buff that gives anti-nade 4 seconds does mean Hog might be somewhat punishable, Suzu as a cleanse still exists, and in fact, Orisa has so many defensive cooldowns herself, you'd actually counter Ana. Because you see one of those cooldowns coming at you, popping either Fortify or Javelin Spin to eat it. Don't all of a sudden assume Ana is a uncounterable pick just because she got a bit stronger. That's not the case. So those 3 tanks will have you set against most things. In the B tier, D.Va has some decent interactions against the tanks above her and below her, but not severe enough to like easily carry the game, I feel. She's a bit fair of a character, though without a ton of shields in the game, D.Va's ultimate can do some work, especially with a lot of slower characters in the meta right now. Sigma, Winston, and Zarya are all just a bit fair for me. Good in their positive matchups, but aren't oppressive enough to overcome weaker matchups. And that's what I would say for the tanks. Moving on to the supports now, I still keep Kiriko in S tier, and I put Lucio back in S tier, mainly because with a lot of speed nerfs in the patch, having speed localized in that one pick disproportionately gave him the power to control the repositioning battle. While Lucio isn't so great to counter a Roadhog, for example, he does get your team in to do their job and get on their good matchups faster, which is kind of key to the whole game. And it's going to take you knowing how to identify those matchups and help your team take them over and over again. Nerf after nerf, Kiriko's still at the top of the list, mainly because her strongest component has yet to be touched. Either the fact that she has so many escapes as a support, similar to like Moira, she's kind of untouchable, but has even better dueling if you can hit a headshot or two when something attacks you. But on top of that, her ranged pocket healing is over the top. It's even better than Mercy's somehow. It's this character alone that sort of marks out a lot of other characters that could otherwise be good, but just can't burst things down through Kiriko's healing, or flank her because she's unflankable, since she can teleport through walls and Suzu herself. Mercy's fitting in this as well because her movement, and it seems players' skill at it, just keeps getting better. Mercy's movement is ridiculous if you master it. There's a high premium on supports that can survive. And now, since there has been nerfs to certain things, like Sojourn, for example, a lot of damage have been getting reined back in, having a breakpoint advantage with Mercy's Blue Beam is a much more noticeable support utility. Keep this in mind as we see meta changes in the future. The better defensive tanks are, the worse Mercy becomes, because if you say, for example, try to use Mercy to pocket a character in a D.Va meta, D.Va can mark that damage source and effectively is eating up both your damage and support utility at the same time, countering like a big chunk of your team. But since those tanks are kind of middling, and picking one of them in order to go at and deny a damage source, the enemy might pick one of the brawler tanks and just outfrag you anyway. That's sort of how that works. And I think the Mercy pick will make more sense when we look at the damage category later, but the A tier, I do have Ana and Baptiste. A funny thing about Ana is I know a lot of players were hoping that maybe she would help shut down Roadhog, but the healing buff also helps Roadhog. In a Roadhog mirror, Ana is insane. To pocket him, burst him back up, heal nade on him as he breathers. He gets healing amp on the breather to get him up to basically full from 0. The Ana buffs helped her against flankers and as well to be a DPS threat, which I think is warranted based on how low her mobility is. I mean, she has none, right? So she can shoot back at a lot of damage now, including Tracer, who she can now two-shot, but all of them, you hit your shots as Ana, they pack a punch. So keep that in mind, Ana players. She wants to have a more balanced playstyle, because while the healing buff will give her nano faster, some of the best plays Ana can make right now is to shoot, like, let's say, the enemy Mercy out of the sky. Being a ranged damage threat is a big deal in Overwatch 2, and Ana is very relevant now with that extra 5 damage. Alongside her, though, is Baptiste. Now, he's going to come into play when you're in a slower game, because he's really good against characters like Orisa and Ramattra, because they facilitate a much slower tank exchange. And Baptiste play is maximized when you shoot both your heal and primary fire alternating. Almost every metal rank Baptiste player I see only focuses on healing. And the secret is he's all about APM. A heal shot for your team, a headshot for the Orisa. Keep cycling that back and forth, and Baptiste can put up some insane numbers right now. I think he's key for the Ramattra meta because he really likes teammates with big health pools. He's good with Reinhardt, but remember, he was also good back in the bunker playstyle in Overwatch 1, and that's what Ramattra does. With Nemesis form, he gets such a high health pool that regenerative burst becomes even better. And his ultimate is one of the few ways you can reliably shut down Ramattra and actually be able to kill him. You need something that's like channeling, that is overkill amounts of damage that lasts a while. A lot of the supports aren't going to help you at all against Ramattra's ults because he just waits it out, or they don't contribute enough damage for it to meaningfully do anything. So keep that in mind. Bottom 3 supports now, for me, Zenyatta doesn't really fit against anything relevant for the most part until you're in a full like Ramattra sniper mirror or something. Otherwise, the game will be rushing you down too fast. You're going to be the target. And if you have the teamwork to keep yourself alive and mark something with Discord and apply your pressure, then Zen's fine. But I don't know if there's enough relevant characters that help his ultimate enough to get value. Like, for example, when you think to the top tanks right now, Doomfist, Hog, and Orisa, their ults aren't even necessarily the best part of their kits. Transcendence might be a perfect one-to-one answer for Graviton Surge, for example. There's kind of no point against the top tanks ults, sort of with Terra Surge with Orisa, but there's a lot of characters that can just get out of it anyway with mobility. So why do you need an ultimate? And if you did, Lucio's got one attached anyway. And then on top of it, Ramattra ult is so slow that you don't need a quick burst of impact. You need like prolonged impact that can play the long game. So Zen's got potential, but not really worth it in my opinion. Moira is a massive trap pick right now, I'd say, where try to keep in mind that surviving just to do vague healing is not enough right now at all. Whereas the other supports really have big impact plays that matter a lot. Like compared to a Mercy, that effectively means your damage will always beat the enemy's damage. Moira just sort of vaguely helps the team, and it's not that good against a lot of the characters that are good right now, but I keep her at B tier, middle of the pack, because at least you won't die as much, but you'd rather learn Kiriko or Mercy or something, I feel, if you want to have Moira's playstyle, and you'll have more impact. While Moira wants to farm big stats, the key stat to keep in mind is, are you winning the team fights and are you helping get eliminations? And if you're not doing that, you're probably not contributing in a meaningful way, to be honest. And speaking of that, Brig is struggling out there because even characters you'd think should be pretty good against in theory, like Doomfist, he has just too severe of a playstyle. And a lot of the good tanks are kind of like that, where she's a slow character that wants to control space, sort of similar to what I said about Ramattra, but the game is too bursty, and especially when we see the damage picks, it'll sort of make sense that she just gets blown up by some of the best damage. So let's get into talking about them. Reaper and Junkrat are nutty. Both of them have the ability to go toe-to-toe with some of the tanks, at least in the windows of opportunity they can die. Like, don't expect to just kill the Orisa, but when she doesn't have cooldowns, these are some of the characters that actually have any damage potential to kill them. But beyond that, with some of the other pairings in the game, like Reaper getting sped in by Lucio, runs over a lot of squishies, and the Junkrat spam is just sort of uncontested in the game, as we talked about in a separate video previous to this one. He adds enough pressure, burst, and raw stats to the damage category, as well as interactions with the crowd control game. He sort of does everything you need out of a damage pick, and it's outrageous that we're saying that about Junkrat. But the funny thing about Overwatch 2 is that while the team's trying to stabilize the support position, that means you can kind of opt out of range damage duels a lot of the time and kind of just hold your ground. I think that's something we should suspect and maybe try to keep in mind about as you start to make support stronger and help them avoid fights. It also takes a lot of damage picks out of the game, at least from being, you know, the top pick that's going to dominate everything. The A tier is filled with skill picks that I think have enough skill expression in order to add a lot to the game. They quickly reverted that OP Tracer buff, otherwise she would be higher. Keep in mind, Ana can two-shot her, but I think all of these picks have plays to make against the other best characters in the game and have big impact. There's a few big surprises here, I would assume. That Sojourn is still considered top tier despite every nerf they can think of, mainly because she has the opportunity to both be mobile and bursty, which is kind of what you need, which a lot of characters are either one or the other. Sojourn's still both. And the biggest benefit above anything is how small her hitbox is. So whereas other burst characters typically are slower and easier to pin down, Sojourn's just not. But you could exchange the A tier based on your skill anyway. They're ranked here almost based on how easy I think you'll get value out of. The other big surprise probably is Cassidy, way up here in the A tier. Everybody thought he was terrible. Well, the game is slowed down to a degree where you can play the medium range game and look for moments of impact with his magnetic grenade. Even in Overwatch 1, he was considered a strong pick against Roadhog because he can play his cover, and even as bad as roll is, it's enough to get out of the line of sight when Hog's ready to hook you. Meanwhile, medium range damage from the Peacekeeper, and he likes to reload a lot, so he gains a big benefit actually from the DPS passive. And I'll tell you this, playing a ton of Junkrat in the first season as well, even when Cassidy wasn't good, he was one of my biggest threats because he can hit you in the air as you try to fly. He can peek on you and get quick bursts of damage either with a headshot or magnetic grenade. Like, Junkrat's mines are insane, but Cassidy's got a better one that's easier to hit. So Cassidy's kind of like a Junkrat in many ways, just sort of the hit scan version. And as the game slows down, Ashe has a lot of opportunity to rack up a lot of pressure. Very good ultimate. Bob just touching the cart often can help you win the game. There's openings for Widow to be good, and the slower your matchup is, she can dominate, but I don't think it's so easy with how much cover's in the game and how the maps are sort of built. The B tier now, don't underrate these picks. Whenever we can expect Mercy to be good, the flying characters will be good. However, Echo needed the move speed a bit more than she would like, I think. But staying airborne can help you dodge some of the good tanks right now and get damage angles on squishies and help you confirm kills. Torb and Bastion are kind of similar, two sides of the same coin. Really tanky defensive picks. I think Bastion's ult still sucks, and Molten Core is way better, so I put him above. Molten Core's got some amazing interactions in the game right now. Zoning off the objective, just imagine placing it underneath a Bob or a Ramattra ult. With a lot of teams rushing in with Lucio and Reaper, Torb can punish that. Bottom of the list, C tier now. These are heroes that I'm kind of at a loss who they're going to really bully. I think they have niche applicability, but not enough relevant matchups that I would suggest you play them too much. They've all kind of got, like, let's say, one good matchup, but I don't think that's enough. And there's more reliable, high peak impact value to be had elsewhere in the tier list. Guys, that's everything for today's tier list video. Pretty diverse metagame, to be honest. The patch was an improvement, I would say. I think a few things exist that are a bit overstated, but also as players learn Ramattra as a hero and how to play his comp, I think he could go from being mid to probably A tier, right next to Doomfist, and maybe even S tier in the top 1%, where there is just minimal mistakes from most players. He will outvalue the long game, which is kind of an interesting character to have added to the game. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. Be sure to check out today's video sponsor, Manscaped, and use our promo code Overwatch at checkout to get 20% off, free international shipping, and 2 free gifts. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.